All right, at 7 o'clock, we'll begin this regular city commission meeting of the city of Traverse City for Monday, July 15th. Everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry. Start with my iPad. As always, we begin our meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather as the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. With that, we will start our meeting now. My computer screen is frozen, but I believe we'll hand it over to you, Benjamin.
Yes, good evening, Commissioner Anderson,
Present.
Commissioner Shaw, Commissioner Stanley,
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell,
Here.
Commissioner Werner,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson,
Here.
and Mayor Shamrow.
Here. All right, and we will move on to any announcements from the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Shamrow. I have one announcement this evening. The Veterans Drive reconstruction kicks off on July 22nd, and that's between 14th and the city limits.
Great, thank you. And city clerk?
Yes, some meetings to announce for this week, the week of July 15th. The Planning Commission will hold a special meeting. That's on Tuesday, July 16th at 7 p.m. in the Commission chambers. The Arts Commission will meet on Wednesday, July 17th at 3:30 p.m. in the committee room on the second floor. The Joint Planning Commission will meet on Wednesday, July 17th. That's at 5:15 p.m. at Garfield Township Hall on Veterans Drive. The Coast Guard Committee is meeting on Thursday, July 18th, and that's at noon at the Air Station. And finally, with regard to meetings, the DDA Board will be meeting this Friday, July 19th at 9 a.m. in the Commission chambers. And then just a couple of community updates. We mentioned that last week that the first large mailing of absentee ballots for the August election was sent out on June 29th. So everyone that requested an absentee ballot or is on the permanent ballot list should have received that ballot. You can always check the status of your ballot at michigan.gov/vote, including to check when we received it and also ultimately when it's delivered for processing. And the wastewater treatment plant is holding their annual open house. That's on Friday, August 2nd, so a little ways from now, and more information can be found on the city's website. And just my usual announcement to please speak into the microphone so everyone can hear you, and that's all that I've got.
All right, and we'll keep it rolling then with you, Benjamin, and if you could do the consent calendar, please.
Yes, the purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public can ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed from it and placed elsewhere on the agenda for individual consideration by the commission, and such requests will be automatically respected. If an item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single commission action adopting the consent calendar. Item 1, consideration of approving the minutes of the July 1st, 2024 and July 8th, 2024 meetings of the City Commission. Approval recommended. Item 2, consideration of adopting resolutions scheduling a petition for charter amendment ballot proposal as it relates to tax increment financing for the November 5, 2024 election, which is a ministerial action as the City Commission is required to adopt the resolutions. Adoption recommended. Item 3, consideration of amending the resolution recognizing neighborhood associations to formally recognize Fernwood Neighborhood Association. Approval recommended. Item 4, consideration of authorizing a blanket purchase orders for water treatment plant chemicals. Approval recommended. Item 5, consideration of declaring a Ford Interceptor surplus and consideration of authorizing a purchase order for 2 hybrid Ford Interceptors along with equipment upfits for use by the police department, which is a scheduled purchase. Approval recommended. Item 6, consideration of authorizing an amendment to the professional legal services agreement in connection with tax tribunal matters to extend the agreement for 1 year with all terms to remain the same. Approval recommended. And finally, item 7, consideration of authorizing the necessary documents in connection with a settlement regarding opioid litigation with Kroger. Approval recommended.
Okay, thank you for that, Benjamin. Does any commissioner want to pull an item from the consent calendar? Go ahead, Jackie.
Number 3, please.
Okay. Go ahead.
Number 5, please.
Okay. Items 3 and 5 have been pulled. Any further? We'll open up to the public. Would anybody from the public like to pull any items? Items 3 and 5 have already been pulled. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Can I have a motion?
I move that the consent calendar be adopted as amended.
Thank you.
Support.
Julie. Thank you, Mitch. Any comments on that item? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll go on to item number 3. Jackie, you had this pulled for recognizing the Fernwood Association?
Yes, I did. This is just a quick question about the Articles of Incorporation. As I was reading through, I didn't see any clarification or statement about the role of the resident members in either choosing or removing their officers. And it appeared that the decisions about who shall be officers of the neighborhood association and the terms for which they serve and so forth was all in the hands of the board of directors rather than the resident members. And I just wanted to get some clarification on that.
I do believe we have some representatives. They were going to attend. Oh, excellent. All right, from Fernwood, and so maybe either of them could address
Yeah, you
that
have
question
permission
if you
to
want.
address the podium if you'd like.
And please, if you would, for the record, state your name and address, and this is for all public comment this evening. Also indicate, please, if you're a city resident, non-city resident, or city business owner. We've got a 3-minute time allotment. When your time has elapsed, the timer will beep, and we ask that all language be respectful.
Well,
to everyone.
Benjamin, if I can, because we've had this happen with items when it's being brought forward, I'm going to treat Mr. Lasusa as a member of an item.
Okay.
So you will not have a time limit, and you all can
right.
ask questions back and forth then.
Great.
But that does apply later for public comments. Everybody, please remember that. So do you want to ask again since you...
So my question had to do with the role of the resident members within your neighborhood association, because I didn't find a reference within the Articles of Incorporation as to how they might participate in the selection of officers or members of the board of directors.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we originally established the neighborhood association, we put the call out for board. Oh, by the way, I'm Sam Lasusa. I'm a resident here, 152 East 14th Street. And we put the call out to all of the people that had expressed interest, that had attended a block party, that had come to any of our events. We kind of got an exhaustive list of emails and asked for volunteers at that point to fill the board. These bylaws were kind of a template created for every type of nonprofit organization similar to this. We have an annual meeting that establishes kind of the electing of the officers. So any member can come to that. Any member of the neighborhood association could attend that and put forward their name and volunteer to be part of the board if they would like to. We actually do have 2 openings right now, so we are looking if neighbors would like to volunteer to be part of it. So yeah, that's kind of the process for how the members of the board are selected.
Okay, so the annual meeting and the election of board members is within your bylaws?
I believe so. I'm trying to review them really quickly. If there's a vacancy, the board can fill that vacancy through a voluntary process of anybody from the neighborhood who
Through
would like
appointment
to.
by board members.
It looks like, and then it looks like, sorry, just doing a quick read. At any point, there can be a call for a specialty meeting that could appoint someone as well. But we can take a look at that as well, if that's something that you guys would like us to, as far as being more explicit about member selection. We've kind of offered it to the community, and whoever has signed up at this point to do so, to serve, has been accepted. We haven't had more applications at this point than we have roles for.
It ever was thus for neighborhood associations, that there's a core. Could you maybe just provide a sense of the scope of neighbors, residents, and I guess you're also including business owners for potential members? How many members would you guess you have at this point?
So we've had a gathering at Right Brain Brewery that was kind of the kickoff to this, where it was like an informal block party almost, kind of light launch. We had about 60 people at that. We flyered the entire neighborhood, so we kind of divided it into sections, and members of the board went out to all the residences and tried to get the word out about the block party that happened this year. I don't know numbers on how many people we had at this year's block party? We don't have actual numbers. Okay.
You can approach you, Becky, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Becky Kane, 202 East 14th Street. We don't have actual numbers for the folks at the block party. I can tell you that we have an email list that is close to 120 folks at this point.
Thank you. And then the number of residents within your boundaries, or number of properties, or any sense of the scope?
I don't have those numbers in front of me.
I apologize.
No apologies. All I'm trying to do is, get a sense of the level of support for your organization. So that was the reason for the questions.
Yeah, anecdotally, I can say that it was precipitated just by conversations with neighbors. So at the beginning of this, Becky and I started realizing that a lot of our neighbors were having conversations with us, but not with each other, about their desire to have a neighborhood association. And we decided to kind of send an email and start talking to those people and saying, hey, I've heard from all of you that you're thinking about this. And then from there, the ripple effects just kept happening, where neighbors were talking to neighbors and realizing that this would be a great amenity for the neighborhood to be able to come together in community and have block parties and get to know their neighbors a little bit better. So.
And interestingly, that first meeting where we came together there was 10 months ago. So this has all come together rather quickly. I think that shows support right there.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I will certainly support the establishment. I would make a suggestion, a recommendation, that you consider reviewing the bylaws and be sure that you've got that representative aspect of the membership, obviously within the bylaws. So
We'll
that's all.
continue to try to fill those 2 seats.
Commissioner Stanley?
So I had a question actually for the city clerk, because it's your office who has historically been involved with the neighborhood associations, correct?
Yes.
Does the city have any requirements for articles of incorporation or a template that could be used?
We don't have any requirements. We could share other examples. Really, we've left it to the associations to structure themselves, so we don't, provide that. But that's the answer, I think, to your question.
And when someone is applying, are they required to show a proportion of involvement from residents or business owners?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Mitch?
Yes, just a quick search from U.S. Census data. The census blocks don't exactly align with where the neighborhood boundaries are, but this is approximately 750 people.
Thank you.
I would put out there, though, because I know there's some other neighborhoods that are looking, we don't require people to know what the census data is, though, or a board that is representational, as Commissioner Stanley pointed out. I know sometimes my own neighborhood associations have 5 people show up and sometimes 40. So we just appreciate that all of these volunteers, and you set one up yourself, Jackie, are willing to put up neighborhood association groups so we can have more communication in our community. So thank you all for being here tonight to represent Fernwood. We have our questions answered, I think, so would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion that the resolution recognizing the neighborhood associations in Traverse City be amended to add Fernwood Neighborhood Association.
Support.
Thank you. Any further comment on this item from the commission?
Just recognizing that the bandwidth of the city staff isn't infinite, and that message is heard, and we'll look at ways to make sure that the interaction between all the neighborhood associations and city staff is optimized.
Yes. Yep. I know that Benjamin and the clerk's office have been working on a slight restructuring to help staffing with that, but also to make sure that neighborhood associations will stay in the know.
In partnership with the city manager, yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Mitch?
Yes, I'd just like to say that I don't live in Fernwood neighborhood, but I have been following their progress as they've formed from just a gathering of neighbors at Right Brain to actually forming a neighborhood association, having their first block party. And it is good to have people that might live close together actually having some organized and structured group to then hold activities and engage in community building.
Absolutely. Any other comments? Seeing none, we have a motion from Commissioner Stanley and a second by Pro Tem Wilson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, congratulations, Fernwood.
Thank you guys very much.
Like the shirts.
Yeah, they're fun.
All right, on to our second item that was pulled. That was item number 5, relating to the police department vehicles. And Commissioner Warner, you had this pulled?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I won't be supporting this tonight. I brought this up back during our budget process for the potential of EVs for our police department. And at the time, there were reasons provided to the city commission as to why the EVs could not be pursued. And that was detailed in an email to us in the past few days. But to me, I see nothing in there why, say, 2 of the vehicles couldn't be EVs. I can certainly see using those reasons as arguments for not converting our entire fleet in the next year, but no reason why 2 vehicles couldn't be EVs. And there are EVs available from General Motors, so I won't support this tonight.
Okay, any other questions, or would anybody like to make a motion?
I have a question, which is, we're declaring 1 vehicle surplus, but purchasing 2. Is there a specific reason for that? Since most of these vehicle purchases are a direct replacement of existing equipment, why we're essentially expanding the fleet through this single purchase?
Certainly. Do we have?
Joel Tapio can speak to that.
Great.
Yeah, Grad Superintendent Joel Tapio. Some of the cars are shared, so one officer gets out, one officer gets in as they switch their shifts over. And as the hours accumulate on those cars, they become worn out quicker. And we actually had an engine go out recently on one of them because the hours are so high. And the depreciation schedule is kind of set already. So as I'm stepping into this new role, trying to even out some of the hours on the cars so we don't have one car with 23,000 hours and another car with only 10,000.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Wilson, it looked like you were raising your hand. Or sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson, apologize.
I was just going to move that the city manager be authorized to issue a purchase order to the Longhammer
Yes.
Ford of Owasso, Michigan, in the amount not to exceed $151,428 to purchase 2 2025 Ford Hybrid Interceptor Police Patrol vehicles with funds available in the garage fund, and that the garage vehicle 003.19, a Ford Interceptor, declared surplus so it can be sold at auction.
You, Mark? Do you have a second? Okay, seeing none. Motion does not happen then. So I guess we'll move on from this item. That's how the process works. All right. With that, we'll go to old business then. All right, and we're back with our truly exciting, and I'm not saying that sarcastically, drainage district information.
Good evening. Thanks for having me back. I'm here to present a little bit more information to drill down a little bit deeper in a couple of key items with respect to the administrative process of the drain code, should the city desire to use the tools in the drain code to further its stormwater management needs. If you recall, this busy diagram was presented under Chapter 3 and 4 of the Drain Code at the last meeting. It's been embellished a little bit, and I've outlined a few of the steps in the process to elaborate upon today. And the blue arrows are just to indicate exit ramps. This process is somewhat linear, but there are places in the process where it's going no further, either by circumstance or by decisions made along the way. With respect to laying out a drainage district, it starts again with much as in the last presentation. The black font indicates petitioner initiative, and the blue is the drain commissioner function. With the receipt of an application, this is an example from the closest drainage district to the city right now. This is Timber Lane Drive. It borders the city and Peninsula Township. It's one of the oldest drainage districts. This one was filed by landowners, but it reads the same for laying out a drainage district, and I believe you might have an example also in your agenda package tonight. But the first step in the process after receiving one of these is the hiring of a engineering firm or surveyor to determine whether or not a drainage district is practical. So the bullets are twofold here. If there's a dollar sign, that indicates spending. Basically, an engineer through an RFP process would be interviewed and retained to work for the drain commissioner to effect the necessary functions to determine the area to be drained and the most probable route and course and type of construction for a drain. And from that determination and interaction with the drain commissioner, a determination would be made whether or not it is practical to proceed. If it's practical, again, a legal description would be created that would define the boundaries of the drainage district. And following that, it would be solicited from the treasurer a list of parcels that are delinquent in taxes for the past 3 years. And again, it's just a checks and balance process to determine whether or not there is sufficient tax base within the drainage district to proceed. And if that's a go, prepare and file an order done by the drain commissioner. The district would be named, boundary identified and published, and this would be in public notice in the paper. And you'll see in the ongoing slides, it's quite a transparent process. There's ample opportunity for public notice above and beyond Open Meetings Act notifications throughout the process. The next step in the process is the Board of Determination. 3 disinterested parties are sought to provide comment, to take testimony and to evaluate whether or not a drain is necessary once a petition is received for a drain. So it starts off with the drainage district and then application to lay it out. If it's practical to do so, and then a petition is received, it proceeds to the Board of Determination. They either decide it is necessary or it's not by majority vote. The 3 persons involved are solicited from the public. Just to give you an example, in the Cass Road drain example, the most recent one from 2015, the Board of Determination consisted of Mr. Steve Largent, Ms. T.J. Andrews, and John Roth. You might recognize all those names. One is the former drain commissioner, who was not drain commissioner at the time. One is a current county commissioner, and the third is a current state representative. So these are persons that were asked or invited to sit and take testimony and make a determination in open meeting. That Board of Determination notice is very public. Again, the 3 disinterested persons schedule a meeting. That meeting notice is published in the newspaper. A notice of the meeting is served to the county clerk and a road commission board member. It's also served to the city clerk. And then a first-class mailing goes out to every property owner identified from tax rolls in that district. First-class mailing, notifying them of the date and time of the meeting. Again, public participation is encouraged throughout the process, and this board takes testimony not only from the engineering firm retained by the drain commissioner, but from the public at large. From their determination of the majority vote, it's either not necessary or it is. And in this case, this example shows the resolution that authorized the petitioning of the drain by the County Road Commission for the Cass Road drain, and also the application to lay out and widen an existing drain. The apportionment and allocation process is the last step in the process that selected for a little bit more treatment today in presentation. Apportionment is a percentage of a project accruing to individual parcels in a drainage district, and includes governmental units at large. The assessment is different than the apportionment. It's the dollar value of that apportioned cost. So it's not based on SEV or zoning or future use speculation. It's based upon the use benefits derived. And it's a unique circumstance for each drainage district and each project, each drain project. Some of the factors that go into apportionment are things like impervious surfaces, slopes of the properties, whether water is retained on site or not retained on site, the quality of the water likely to be running off a property. But it's an open process. It must be, it's going to be reviewed in another Board of Determination or another open meeting called the Day of Review later in the process. And it's got to be defensible and consistent and impartial. To give you an example, for the Cass Road drain, of the 400 and some parcels in that drainage district that I mentioned in the prior meeting, about 221 of them had assessments that were less than $2,000. And that assessment process was spread over 20 years. So roughly half of them had assessments less than $2,000. The minimum assessment in that assessment roll was $1,500. The maximum was $50,000. To give you an example, Grand Traverse Mall paid $43,700. It was assessed that amount, compared to a residential dwelling, which is closer to the $1,500. Traverse Cold Storage, which is right immediately adjacent to the drain and proximal to the 1987 branch, it is much smaller than the Grand Traverse Mall, but it paid $30,000 because the benefit derived for that property to keep it from flooding is greater than the benefit derived from the Grand Traverse Mall, even though it's much, much larger. Applebee's and Fifth Third Bank, if you recall where those are at, somewhere Division and South Airport Road, roughly $7,800 each. So it gives you an idea on how the different properties are assessed based upon the benefits derived in a prior example. Again, what's not assessed are public lands that are used for a public purpose. Lands that are not assessed include lands owned by the federal government, state and county, city, township, school district, and lands used exclusively for burial grounds. This is an example of the allocation and apportionment from the Cass Road drain example. And this is not only a pie chart to show you the relative cost elements that went into the project. The allocation table on the right side really reads from top to bottom. The first thing that happens in allocation is that the at-large assessments for municipalities and those that are receiving supplemental benefits are taken off the total cost. And then what remaining then are assessed to under formulaic processes to MDOT or the Road Commission. Garfield Township at large in this case, and the county at large. And then the residual is spread across the remaining properties within the district that each receives a benefit. So it breaks down roughly as you see it. And again, in this case, a good bit of construction cost, administrative cost is rolled in with finance here. So in some cases, particularly with property transactions and new lending, A lot of the assessments are paid down early in the process, so the interest costs are reduced. Again, just another quick reiteration that there are places in this process where it's a go or no-go. For instance, early on, if it's not practical, from that first review from the engineering and surveying study for the drainage district, that could be a no-go step. The Board of Determination could determine that it's not necessary. And then later in the process, during engineering and design, it's possible that there's just no way to get easements, or that the project can't go forward because of some engineering challenge that makes it prohibitively expensive. But there are places in the process where if the project does not proceed any further, after a period of 5 years, then the project is essentially deemed, I'm struggling for the correct word from the drain code, but it goes no further, and then the administrative process for closing the drainage district and closing the process takes place. So that's pretty much all I had prepared for this evening, to give you, an overview of the most critical steps in the process, beginning, middle, and end, really.
Great.
And I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Tim.
I'm still not quite getting the apportionment and assessment, so I apologize for that. So can I just, like, hypothetically, if this would move forward and we're talking about an 8th Street drain, let's say hypothetically 50% of the stormwater in that drain is from city streets and US 31, and say the whole project costs $1 million. I'm sure it costs more, but let's say it costs $1 million and 50% is impervious surface of city-state feds. Will 50% of that $1 million be charged to the city and MDOT and the feds, or because of this apportionment sort of thing, it's different?
There is a good bit of gray area in the process. As I indicated in the slide, each drainage district is handled separately. Some thought has to go into each project based on its unique factors, like those you just described. I don't know what the proportion would be for city roads and MDOT runoff, whether it's 50% or 49%. I do know that there will be municipal at-large assessment based on the doctrine of benefits derived. And we'll have to go through that process when we get to it, if it's decided to move forward. There's a lot that has to go in administratively before we ever get to that portion of the project. But I'd be happy in a later meeting, either individually or again in another session, to go through in greater degree the allocation process from other examples, both within this county and outside the county.
I guess the reason I bring it up, my concern, I think it's great that the city would be on the hook for paying for part, and that MDOT or however US 31 gets covered is on the hook. But my concern, I guess, is, does it seem fair and representative to the community, or say again for this 8th Street hypothetical drain, does it end up being the property owners, which are largely residential, I think, in that drain? Do they end up, say it is 50-50, but do they end up carrying 75% of the cost in the city, and MDOT only have to come up with 25%? So I know you can't answer that, but that's kind of my concern, is does it play out how we'd like to think it plays out, or yeah, it starts to slide a little bit, that's all.
Well, those are legitimate concerns, and I can tell you that I share them. If a project like this is going to be successful, it's going to have a lot of public participation and input, and decisions that are made are going to have to be sensitive to all stakeholders. But there will be municipal at-large assessments, conceivably just based on the geometry of the 8th Street, because I didn't read the board packet to determine whether or not there was a selection made out of the options that are offered for different drainage districts. But if it is 8th Street, then MDOT, perhaps the road commission, I think the road commission will have anything in there. But there will be a number of municipal corporations that will get an assessment.
Thank you.
Could you clarify the impact on properties owned by nonprofits who might not currently pay property taxes per se? How would their fair share of benefit and assessment be determined?
With a blindfold on in the same manner that a for-profit entity would or a private residence. It's based on the benefits derived to that property, irregardless of the status of the ownership.
Thank you.
Yes.
With the exception of if that property was a TCAPS property, a school district property.
Yes, public property is used for public purposes.
But a church would have potentially an apportionment.
Yes, and potentially a hospital.
Any other questions?
Does the foster family outpatient facility fall in what we're considering for this district?
That's a good question. But then they would not be accepted from the assessment by these rules then.
They would not be accepted.
Right,
They would,
that's what I'm-
they would
yeah.
be included in the apportionment.
Other questions for the commissioners?
So back on, it doesn't really matter. One of your slides where you first referenced the dollar bullet points in determination, hiring an engineer and the type of construction. And that also, like when, it's so wide open, right, type of construction. And the reason I bring that up is over the years, from time to time, it's not a constant conversation, but ongoing conversation, individuals and entities sharing, their hopes that we as a city could move toward more like nature-based solutions for stormwater. And so one type of construction is, well, let's just put some bigger pipes in there and let's move the outfall a little further offshore and everything's good. And that's not the type of construction that I would support, and I think some fraction of the community wouldn't support that. It might answer the question of what we're trying to do. And so sorry, long way of getting to when are the opportunities for influencing that type of construction and not just leaving it up to an engineer? Or is that in the RFP that's written? Like when does that happen?
I think it happens with the solicitation through the RFP process. I think that when entertaining to interview consultants for a project like this, they would be afforded links to or copies of the city's existing records with respect to the stormwater management plan and the asset management plan, and have a good idea before they even submit a proposal whether or not the concepts that are expressed in those two foundational documents are within their wheelhouse. I think there's already a pretty good indication from the city what the community's interests are, particularly in the latter asset management plan where, in at least 3 different cases, specific design concepts with more natural solutions for retaining stormwater up gradient within the watershed are clearly indicated as examples.
Thank you.
More motion?
I'll make the motion that the resolution for application for laying out and designating a drainage district and petition to locate, establish, and construct a drain be adopted.
Support.
Commissioner. Any other comments or questions from up here? Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, and this isn't for Mr. Smits, but question more, I think, for the city manager, and along the lines of what I had submitted the end of last week, and I think she referenced in a response to the full city commission. But in the table that's included in our packet from city staff for the potential selection of a project. Under the problem definition, it's referenced water quality issue, references drinking water in East Bay, manhole cover being blown off, danger to the public, higher pollutant load, and then likely solution is upstream treatment at multiple locations. And this all could be fine, but I guess my question gets to, should we first be identifying what the pollutants are we're trying to address, and then pursue the funding through the Drain Commission to actually address that? Like yes, we know there's cigarette butts, we know there's heavy outfall as far as just volume, and that then the turbidity goes way up, but as far as actual pollutants, no reference is made yet as far as what it might be that we're trying to address. So I'm just wondering, like, the process, do we want to first, hey, it's this, and these are exceeding these levels, and we'd like to be able to get to these levels, and that would help inform this RFP process then to go out and say, hey, with some nature-based solutions, can you help us achieve these goals? Right now, like, I don't know what we'd be asking for. And maybe we get this moving and then we decide, all right, now let's figure out what we're asking for. Horse, cart, all those things. Thanks.
I think you could do it in multiple ways. Like you stated, the board could decide you'd prefer to do some research on pollutants first, or you could approve this and then go, you wouldn't have to, like, you could start this process while also then, at the same time, looking at and getting the pollutants identified. I think that's a board decision.
No, and that, I'm supportive of that. I guess I'm trying to point out that, hey, at some point, we have to figure out what it is we're trying to address.
If I may?
Yeah, just a quick
Oh, wait,
answer
sorry.
to Commissioner Stanley's question. The outpatient facility, at least if our stormwater management plans maps are accurate, is in a drainage district that drains to Mitchell Creek, so it will be separate from this.
Thank you, Mitch. And Andy, you wanted to respond to the next?
Just that I recognize that a valid point, and I would suggest that it be in parallel with this process, because arguably if a board of determination is going to take testimony to determine necessity, certainly pollutant load information would be great testimony to have. And there are other sources of funding outside of the drain code for those types of assessment activities. It's proximity, easy access to sampling. So would suggest that's probably a very low threshold in cost to get some information like that. But certainly some of it's available from the many decades of study with respect to urban runoff, with respect to pollutant loads typically in the first flush, oils and greases, metals from tire wear, etc. And again, petroleum products, polynuclear aromatics from road wear.
Any other questions? Right, I'm going to actually open up for public comment there. If anybody has public comment on this item, please approach the podium. And you can line up too if you're waiting to speak.
Hi, I'm Sue Chang, 521 Agosa. I wasn't going to talk, but I'm going to. First of all, thank you to the Drain Commissioner for bringing this to light. I really appreciate that you guys are starting to become more aware of it all. What the solution will ultimately be, I don't know. I know I send you a lot of pictures of cigarette butts and stuff because that's so visible, but really it's more the concern of all the stuff that we're dumping into the bay. So I just encourage you guys to vote yes and support this so we can see the project moving forward. And in the meantime, I completely agree with Mr. Werner in his assessment of what exactly is it that we're dumping into the bay. But really, we shouldn't be dumping anything. Thank you guys, for those of you who have replied to my cousins. You got quite a few emails from cousins from all over the nation that we all grew up right at that 2044 East 8th Street beach, and the passion for the bay runs deep in our blood. So we really appreciate your time on all this. Thanks. Ani Carolyn Sandrager and Dishnikas up Shabby-Town and Dida. My name is Carolyn Sandrager. I'm the policy director at Flow. And we also wanted to say thank you for working on problem solving this increasingly pressing issue. And we particularly like that it will follow natural topography rather than political boundaries. And while I acknowledge that we're here to talk about this ordinance, we also want to let Traverse City know that Flow is the resource for stormwater management and for green infrastructure. We have been following a bill, SB 660, which is for the developing stormwater management utilities. It's crucial for addressing the urgent issue, and the main goal is to establish a comprehensive framework for managing the stormwater. With this bill, it ensures that it is bulk compliant, so I think that's where the fear comes from with the legal issues. And if SB 660 were to pass and local units of government followed in compliance with it, they would be well prepared to face legal challenges in the court system. The bill also offers flexibility to create those stormwater utilities, making it an option rather than a requirement. It also allows for the local unit of government to orchestrate that ordinance fee. So issues like you were bringing up, everybody paying their fair part would be able to be worked out if they were following in compliance with this bill, especially issues with water affordability, as we know that we have a lot of folks in the state that are facing that right now. So we are really looking forward to this legislative action passing. We'd like to gain support from the city of Traverse City, and we would like you guys to keep this in mind as you deliberate this ordinance. And while we work on things at home to fix, we should also be looking statewide. So we hope that we can have your support and you'll take this into consideration. I believe that hits all of my main points. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, TJ Andrews, 619 Webster Street. I'm here, I wear many hats in our community. My name came up earlier as a member of a prior drainage member of the Board of Determination. I'm here in my capacity this evening as County Commissioner. Referring to Commissioner Treadwell's comment, looking at the map from the 2017 Stormwater Asset Management Plan, if I understand the drainage district that we're talking about, this is a drainage district that is largely in my district. It consists of a total based on this map, of about 8 or 9 residential streets. Some of it are in my district, some are in Commissioner Flynn's district, and in fact, Commissioner Flynn lives in this district. I anticipate that she may have some concerns as well. I'm not here to speak for her. I do want to raise 3 buckets of concerns that have come to my attention. I understand this is a preliminary discussion, although there is a proposal to take action tonight. My first question goes to what is the problem that this drain is going to solve. The resolution states that this is determined to be addressing a public health concern, but the table shows a variety of concerns. It shows a potential threat to the water supply. It shows loading from streets. It shows capacity challenges. And so identifying exactly what those concerns are, we do know that there are at least 3 or 4, if not more, stormwater outlets that go into East Bay that are closer to the water supply, that are also on public beaches where we had E. coli closings with too much regularity. Those are also concerns, and in fact, just from a layperson perspective, appear to be a greater threat to water quality than this drain, which is further south and further away from that. So just having an understanding of what is the public health threat that you have determined tonight to be would be helpful to help frame a project going forward. My second set of questions relates to the exit strategy. I appreciate there are exit strategies. My question is, who decides those? Is that your decision, or is that the Drain Commissioner's decision? It sounds like that's the Drain Commissioner's decision to make those go, no-go decisions. It doesn't come back to this board, to my knowledge. So if that is the case, I will just point out the elephant in the room. The Drain Commissioner has not always been well supported by the County Commission. The Drain Commissioner has, in fact, been a bit of a boxing match over the years. As we know, it's a political position, and it has been the recipient of some of the worst politics in our community in the last few decades. And we've got to acknowledge that that's where we're at. If the Drain Commissioner, we have an outstanding Drain Commissioner now, and politics can change.
Excuse me. Thank you for your comments. Your time has elapsed. Thank you.
Good questions, thank you.
Justin Reed, 638 Kaji Drive, apartment 1B. I appreciate the city commission looking at this. With the fact that the Traverse City population keeps on growing, and it's a very important issue with with more people coming in our community, and more of dealing with it now instead of dealing with later. Is a investment back into our community, and shows that it's a concern, and it shows that the city really wants to pay attention to, bottom lines, trying to solve that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the crowd? Going once. Seeing none, Mr. Smits, are you good? Did you want to address anything that got brought up, or?
Well, I wanted to thank Commissioner Andrews for acknowledging the challenges of this role. But I did want to point out that they're really on those exit ramps. I believe there's only one of those. We can flip back to it real quick. That the Drain Commissioner is the decision maker, and that's the practicality for the drainage district. The Board of Determination is independent from the Drain Commissioner. The Drain Commissioner facilitates the constitution of that board, and they make their decision independent of the Drain Commissioner. And then the last exit ramp, again, it's not the Drain Commissioner's decision, it's whether or not the project can actually move forward practically with easements in place, with permissions that are necessary, with funding. If it can't survive on its own merits, if we can't get the necessary access to property, then it doesn't go forward, and that's not a Drain Commissioner decision either. And that's really all I had to add. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to elaborate.
Thank you. Yep, go ahead, Tim.
I don't know that this is a question for you, but feel free to chime in, but maybe for the three folks at the end of the table up here. So if this gets, well, it sounds like this will get approved tonight, but say this gets approved tonight, when, if ever, does it come back before this body or the next subsequent city commission?
Well, I think that was a side conversation that our city engineer and the Drain Commissioner have been having ongoing about when to schedule it to bring it back before you. And so maybe they can give their ideas about how that might roll out.
Wait, and is it required to be back? Because again, because the political nature of the position, is it required? Who decides whether it comes back? Like, can we say we want it to come back? Or is it up to somebody else to decide, because they want to play nice, they will bring it back? Does that make sense as well?
That does make sense. I think that it is the intention to bring it back, but it's not required to necessarily come back in this setting. And the drain commissioner is going to correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think that's correct, and I think it's in everyone's interest, particularly the drain commissioners, to ensure that there is adequate involvement in the public and between the county and the city and the city residents and those especially in the drainage district. You know, there's all downside if that doesn't happen. And some of the various points in the process that Ann and I have talked about that make sense are at those points in that process or that timeline when the drain commissioner and/or the city actually have decisions or have outcomes to share. So, for instance, the RFP process for a consultant. You know, that's a great opportunity to share the results of an interviewing process, to talk about the qualifications, abilities, and successful projects of a selected vendor. Another good time would be, you know, when seeking input for the Board of Determination, to talk to influential city members about disinterested persons they think would be qualified to take testimony about constructability, about necessity, about public health and safety. Those are just some of the ones that we've talked about, and certainly normal times to come back to the commission would be at different points into the design process, whether it's a 30% design or 60, or when, for instance, maybe before we hit, or if we were to hit a roadblock where there might be an exit ramp, when we run into a problem or something in the process where we discover something that's not in the asset management plan or not in the stormwater plan. Certainly want to keep you apprised of both progress, you know, hurdles and the like. It's in everyone's interest to keep it transparent and engaged.
No, I was going to say the same thing. In order to see this really be successful, especially a first drainage district, we would want it back as often as practical.
Any other questions?
Again, thank you for your service to our community.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mitch.
Yes, as the first drainage district that will be created in the city, if we're going forward with this, I am optimistic in that this is an area where we do have, I'd say, more options available to us in terms of what infrastructure can go, how this can be improved. Looking at the USDA's soil profiles for this, the majority of this area is listed as Rubicon sand, which is, as its name suggests, sand to the first 60 inches of depth. Most of it has water table more than 80 inches below the surface. Rubicon sand is specifically described as excessively drained, having negligible runoff, having no frequency of flooding and ponding. All these characteristics means that runoff and stormwater wouldn't have been an issue in the pre-development landscape, and the fact that we do have runoff and contamination is a direct result of the development, parking lots and driveways and streets that have gone in this area that have channeled a lot of water that would otherwise go straight through the sand. But that also means that we have opportunities through going forward with this drain district creation process to then have funding available and to then create opportunities for better stormwater management and better management of that parking lot and street-related pollution.
Thank you, Commissioner Treadwell. Any other comments? Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I'll support this. I'm nervous, very nervous about this because better, like we use a lot of qualitative words, but we still don't know, we haven't defined what better is, and we don't even know what pollutants we're trying to address. And just because we put heavy metals into the sand, now they're concentrated in the sand. Like it's so it's a big task. I will support it. yeah, there's a lot of pressure because it's the first one. We need to try to do it well, but once it's launched, other than the court of public opinion, it sounds like it's out of our hands, and that's always a tough fly be free sort of thing.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other comments from up here, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Go free and enjoy and get the process rolling, Andy. I don't envy everything you're pulling together, but I know you're going to do it well. Thank you. All right, next item is closed session for attorney-client communication. Maybe everybody else's is. Mine's downloading right now, won't open, so go ahead, Lauren.
I was just going to say, I sent out an attorney-client memo last week for your consideration. I didn't have any questions or comments back. If you want to go into closed session, if the commission wishes to discuss further, if you have questions, you can. You don't have to. It's on there for your consideration.
Get up to the commission then. All right, seeing no takers, we'll move on then to new business, item number 1. And that is the competitive bidding process on Grandview Parkway and waiving the competitive bidding process on Grandview Parkway. And I will hand that over to you, Liz.
Sorry, I haven't changed my screen over. Apologies. While I'm loading my screen, I do want to introduce Michelle Hunt, who's here tonight to answer any questions that we might have. She's our park superintendent. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, I don't know what happened with my, I lost me, sorry. So in your executive summary, construction for Grandview Parkway Segment 1, which was Garfield Avenue to Front, has wrapped up. And as we move forward into Segment 2, which is US 31, Grandview Parkway and Front Street, west to Division, we need to consider a contractor to install new irrigation for the new and existing landscaping along the city's right-of-way. Typically, the engineering department would advertise the project, receive bids, and proceed with the contract with the lowest responsible bidder. However, Elmer's is already contracted by MDOT for the Grandview Parkway project. As a part of that contract, Elmer's will be facilitating the landscaping along Grandview Parkway. The construction of Grandview Parkway adds complexity for another contractor other than Team Elmer's. We have in front of you a few options to consider to approve the bid waiver for Team Elmer's for irrigation repair and replacement, and or option 2, to deny the bid waiver from Team Elmer's and instruct the city staff to issue a competitive bid. And we do have staff here to explain the recommendation, which is option 1. Elmer's is already working on the project zone and doing the landscaping. It eliminates conflicts with the second contracting company, which will facilitate a smoother, quicker construction project and reduce time, costs associated with coordination, traffic control, phasing. And it would also reduce the contracting time. And so that is what our staff is recommending, and we do have our staff here to answer questions about that process, including our city engineer, Ann Pagano.
Well, could we have Ann just come up and talk a little bit? real quick?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Good evening, I'm Ann Pagano, city engineer. Did you have specific questions or?
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, so looking at the large map that's included in here, to me, like we talk about water conservation, usually budget season, because we don't get to see water-related things other than purchases very often, but as far as rates and all, to me, this is a huge opportunity at water conservation, and yet on that large map, I'm only seeing one small area that uses drip irrigation. Sorry, 2 areas that use drip irrigation. So to me, it's a lost opportunity. And then in addition to just what sort of sprinkler heads are being used, it's the opportunity to be planting, I'll call them significant trees, trees that can grow to at least 40 feet in height, and that are probably more tolerant to variations in precipitation as opposed to the small decorative trees. And then thirdly, that in the MDOT right-of-way, and especially on the median, to me, there's no reason to have any irrigation. We should be planting things that don't require irrigation to save money. So it's both water conservation and money savings. You know, if MDOT, if they want some beautiful flower beds on their medians, like, let them do it, or let TC Tourism help pay for it, or whatever it might be. But why should the citizens of Traverse City be paying for whatever it is? Like, and aside from that, we just shouldn't be irrigating for highway beautification. There ought to be plants that can be installed that don't need irrigation. Thanks.
I'm going to let Michelle take that one.
Hi, Michelle Hunt, Parks and Recreation Superintendent. So I'll address the last one about the plants, because that's the most in my head right now, and then we can go back from there. So we spent about a year with MDOT going through the species. The city was very involved in that process. Myself, our city arborist, our director of public services, as well as the city engineer before Ann. So we spent a lot of time going back and forth with MDOT about what species made sense. The trees, I sent many, many revisions to MDOT, and they obliged every step of the way to what the city wants based on what's on our tree selection guide. So it's our recommendation from our urban forestry of what we would like to see. The trees they're native. They're not necessarily what I would call decorative. They're things like hackberry. We actually got rid of the ginkgo when we're doing a different kind of maple. So like things like that would actually make a little bit more sense in the right-of-way. What MDOT gave us originally was just what they recommend when they do all projects. They have a template. They supplied us with that. During this process, as you'll know, in the existing, well, it's about to be torn up, all of those center islands, it was turf with trees. And there really weren't any like planter beds like you see on Division or East or 8th Street. So the decision was made, an effort to participate in traffic calming and also the area. It's right in front of the Hotel Indigo, right across from the open space. It's pretty hot, so the median had to be pretty small. So there was a really lengthy conversation around reducing the urban heat island index that we have and planting those species. And those species thrive best when you supply them with drip irrigation. So the trees actually are like, I don't know if they're reduced, I have to get that number, but we made an effort to change what we have on the parkway. Yes, because it looks nice, and second, because the species that we chose will thrive in those areas, so they won't get destroyed as quickly from salt and things like that. So if that answers your question, I would say the city has really made an effort to make sure that what we're putting back, like the type of, all the way down to the types of fescue, have been very much analyzed and like recommended from what we would plant ourselves, and MDOT has accommodated that. So the trees too, I was looking at the tree list before, trying to pull it up really quick. So we've got maple, hackberry, Kentucky coffee tree, little leaf lindens, the ginkgos are gone, some lilacs, English oaks, zelkovas. And then on other areas, we have dogwoods, junipers, honeysuckle, cypress. All of those are going to thrive in this area, and we actually, that's what we went through. And like, for instance, we made a recommendation to not do a maple and do a hackberry because we're trying to plant less maples, because that's what our tree management plan suggests. So does that answer the question about why we have, like, why some medians are turf with trees, some have I would just call them native pollinator beds, because they're all basically perennials, which
Well, I guess the question was more like why, I'm just not supportive of irrigation in a median. Like, we should be able to come up with species
Sure.
that don't need irrigation.
So really, in the median, there's only that, there's that one, and then I think right before you turn into Marina Drive, there's going to be on like the very end of the caps of the medians, there will be those plantings, but for the majority of the parkway, it'll look like it did before. So it'll be turf with trees planted equidistant from each other. So for the first year of that tree's life, it's extremely crucial that we have them watered regularly, and unfortunately rainwater, we can't really count on that as a sufficient watering source, and to put tree bags on them, it's not recommended. by most like manufacturers of the tree bags and warranties of the trees to have them last any longer than 1 year. So we've had rotor heads on the medians where and that's, for those who don't know, a rotor head is the one you typically see where it casts out far, like on a soccer field or something, or like all over the open space like we had. So that's actually what's going to take care of the turf, to help with turf establishment, and then it's going to help establish the trees. So the drip irrigation is an opportunity for those plants, the planter beds that I mentioned. So planter beds referring to like the pollinator beds with the native plants. It's really just industry standard. So industry standard is you have your turf, the best way to water it, the most efficient. It's not necessarily drip irrigation, it's spray rotor heads. So long distance, like how farmers do with cornfields, right? So it goes a long distance in a short period of time so that you get the maximum return.
I have a question then, given the direction of Commissioner Warner's comments. Are there any, from his request, are there any trees that can be planted that don't require irrigation? We've, for years, had people email after email after email saying, you guys planted all these trees and I see the bags, but they're all dead. And we've had to replace them, and we've had to do that. So as we talk about wanting to plant more trees and have more trees in more spaces, it becomes this kind of catch-22, where we're damned if we do or damned if we don't, because we plant trees and they die, or we have irrigation, but I understand Commissioner Warner's point that we're paying to have an irrigation put in, but if we don't irrigate the trees and make sure that they're consistently being watered with our inconsistent climate these days, then I'm just outside of cusps of trees in various like parks, not sure how we would ever have trees. And trees have been brought up along street lines in several of our conversations about different areas that we've been looking at beyond just these MDOT projects. So I'm asking, are there trees that are low moisture that are low, I won't say desert, obviously we don't live in a desert, but more desert-like that are native species that we can put out into medians?
I think that's always, yes, that can be explored. I wouldn't recommend, it's not recommended to put trees such as pines in the right-of-way or on the medians, like a white pine, a red pine, things like that, Scotch pine. Irrigation gives the trees the opportunity that they need for the most success. So we can rely on rain, we can rely on irrigation, and then the trees are provided the highest chance of success. Well, and then you add in manually watering them, then you're giving the trees, and don't forget the turf, because I think it's really important that we talk about the turf establishment too, which has a cooling effect for the parkway. So all of those mature trees were once there, they're now gone because we had to get rid of them to build the parkway, right? So now not only is the landscape of the parkway different, but you have a significantly increased heat essentially on the parkway because the trees are not as shade, thank you, they're not as mature. So that every chance that we can give to have the trees, the turf, and the plants fight against the fact that they're already going to be stunted in growth because they're in a median that's only 10 feet wide, I think that's the best we can do is make sure that they're watered by rain, by manually for a little bit, and then by irrigation.
Thank you for explaining that decision matrix. Go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, so I'm proposing we not have trees in the median because the trees we've had historically are 12, at best 15 feet tall. And they're decorative and fine, but the cost of that, why don't we put a real tree, whether it's an oak, a white pine, whatever, out of MDOT's right-of-way in the park area, like we see this is a huge park area with all this irrigation, and put drip irrigation to make sure the tree survives, because that is the standard for growing trees, is drip irrigation, not rotary. Turf is not our first priority on a median for a highway. So I'm just, are there trees in the MDOT right-of-way in the median that will grow to 40 feet or larger?
I think so, like a hackberry will grow to 40 to 60 feet, but because it's in the median, its growth is not going to be as profound as if it were in the middle of the open space.
And chances are it'll get hit and run over before it can mature anyhow, based on our experience out here. So I would prefer just let's not even bother with trees. It's not a good use of money. Let's put those trees just to the north in this beautiful park that we have all along here, or just to the south, that sort of thing. So that's what I'm proposing, like forego the irrigation, forego the turf grass, plant things. Don't look for trees that can grow in arid conditions. Look for native grasses and such that can grow in arid conditions and plant those.
Commissioner Stanley?
So if we aren't planting trees in those medians and we're not concerned about turf, I do want to point out that as we're reconstructing the parkway, we are going from concrete, which has a very high albedo, to blacktop, which has a very low albedo. And as you're talking about urban heat island effects, that's something that I am concerned about, and I do think it's worthwhile to have vegetation in those medians to help mitigate some of that urban heat island, especially given the difference that we're going to see in the material that's being used. And I'm very happy that it's not concrete. You know, the noise of the concrete alone was very problematic, as well as being able to repair it. However, I do think that puts greater necessity toward having some type of vegetation to break up those urban heat islands and having that in the median. So I would not want to forego vegetation. And if turf is what is being proposed, it would be great to see something more like what we have on Division, if that's possible. But I also know that we are doing this project right now, and therefore you've already put in countless person hours of effort into making these determinations about what are the best fit for this project and for our environment within, and worked very well with MDOT. Thank you for your advocacy for our community, and thank you for involving our arborist, and thank you for making sure that the community knows that we have an arborist. So I would say it's very important to have some vegetation there in those medians, whether or not that's trees, but if there is something that's growing there that we need to mitigate those urban heat islands, we then have to have some kind of mechanism to water them.
Okay.
I was just going to say, so Division is, I think, the most recent, correct me if I'm wrong, project that would relate to this, and there's drip irrigation in those islands from 14th Street to, where is that? Anyway, there's drip irrigation in those center islands. Do I have the exact science on this? No, but I think to the best case we have to reduce that heat is to provide shade. And, you know, the type of species that are in the center islands on Division are not going to provide nearly as much of that mitigation as if you were to plant shade, you know, columnar deciduous trees. So there's just a little bit of a difference of what would be possible from the species that we plant. So,
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson, it looked like you had your hand up a second.
Well, Commissioner Stanley kind of said it much more articulate than I would have, but or eloquently than I would have. But also the contribution to traffic calming by having the trees in the center. Is that not relevant or?
it was discussed with MDOT, so that was a big part of the conversation as to, a lot of it was replacing what was currently there. But yes, it did come up with MDOT, because there are certain trees that, you know, don't make sense. Planting a young white pine is, probably into a decade into its life, it's a traffic hazard, because it's like a little tiny Christmas tree, and you can't see through it. So those are like all the kind of conversations that we had. I always advocate for more pines, white pine, state tree, let's plant it. Our arborist hears that from me all the time. But does it make sense in this location? So I don't necessarily have the information on what we can do about the species at this point, because we're under contract. And so that would be a different person to answer that question. But as like where we're at right now is the plans, you know, what we have proposed, what Elmer's is planning on constructing and then installing, that we're at that stage. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
And MDOT has a contract with Elmer's. I don't know how we would go about changing that at this point, what our involvement is and what our ability would be to do that.
Sorry?
Oh, well, actually, what I was going to say really quick, and I do see your hand up, Jackie, is the conversation has gone on. I realize we do not have a motion on the floor. So we are right now getting into deliberation of something that has not been proposed. So do we?
No.
Yeah. So would somebody like to make a motion?
you gonna leave me hanging again? or-
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I move that the competitive bidding process be waived and that the mayor and city clerk execute a contract with Elmer's Crane and Dozer in the amount of $451,481 for the repair and replacement of the irrigation system along Grandview Parkway from Division Street to Sunset Park, with such contract subject to approval and as to its substance by the city manager and its form by the city attorney, with funds available in the general fund, Fund 101, and capital fund, Fund 245.
Have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Stanley. So a motion by Wilson, second by Stanley. Okay, sorry, Jackie, I just wanted to do procedure properly. Please go ahead.
No worries. My question actually has to do with the contract, and if I understood option one correctly, which is the one that you're recommending, we would be waiving competitive bidding in favor of Team Elmer's doing this work. But then Team Elmer's is going to subcontract to Traverse Outdoor Landscaping and Irrigation Company?
That's correct.
Why is that?
They're a specialty firm, a specialty contractor. They specialize in landscape and irrigation.
And why we wouldn't just contract directly with them and not work through Team Elmer's?
Well, a big part of that was due to Elmer's. So Elmer's has their contract with MDOT, and one of the biggest things that we wanted to make sure was for efficiency and schedule, and also MDOT is already paying for traffic control, and what was the other part?
Mobilization.
Mobilization. So there's actually cost-saving measures to working with Elmer's than if we were to go directly with Traverse Outdoor, because Traverse Outdoor would be required to implement the same things that Elmer's already has in its contract, and therefore we're not getting charged for them again, if that makes sense.
There just could be conflicts when you have two contractors in the same space. Similarly to what we talked about with the TART Trail, it's ideal, we're gonna get the best value here if we have the same contractor that's working on that project, doing this project as well.
So Elmer's is almost like a project manager on it.
Yes. City staff will actually be on site to assist with, like, questions that the contractor has. So we will be involved in that process, working together.
So are we saving money by using Elmer's as a
Yeah.
project
Yes.
manager?
So
or
they're
are
the
we
general
paying additional
contractor.
versus contracting directly with Traverse Outdoor?
Yeah, sorry, they're the general contractor and they have subcontractors. They have other subs too that are doing other work on the project, so they would be managing the project and the landscape firm would do the actual work. But Elmer's would be providing some of the mobilization savings, the traffic control, that kind of thing.
It saves Traverse Outdoor from the coordination between Traverse Outdoor and MDOT, because to skip that, to go to that communication would require someone in the middle, which would be city staff, or in this case, Elmer's is already being paid to do that, to work through the project schedule, to communicate with MDOT, so then project manager is the perfect term, exactly.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have other questions or anything? Go ahead, Mitch.
Yes, I have another question about an aspect of the contract since we've brought that up. I'm not sure if the best people to answer this are in the room, but I'll ask it anyway. This is being funded out of the general fund and capital fund, which makes sense. Those are our two largest funds, and this is above and beyond our normal park improvements, even though it is largely taking part in our parks. However, there's a couple areas. One, historically, the Cherry Festival has been involved in irrigation in the open space. They put in some of the irrigation in there the first place. And the heaviest use of the open space sees each year is during the week of Cherry Festival. The heaviest irrigation that it sees is in the week directly following Cherry Festival. And the most common instance for damage to the irrigation system is because of Cherry Festival related activities. So I don't know if they weren't approached, but I am a little curious if they could be leveraged as a potential funding source for part of the project. Also, part of the project happens in area that's not a Traverse City Park, but land owned and managed by the Joint Rec Authority, which has its own budget. And part of the area in the Clinch Park area is specifically in and around the marina, and the marina does have its own fund. So it seems that there are potential sources of money that could be utilized for this.
Well, I'm going to push back a little on the Cherry Festival part, because Cherry Festival did install that many, many years ago when there were a lot of handshake agreements and things going around. And they do use the entirety of the open space, and they do contribute to that, and I have no objections to that. But are you now, like, if, to me, though, that is a large swath that they are using, that we have an agreement with. I'm not sure where we would get into saying that they owe us for maintaining some of our MDOT line, or are we going to start going into the number of feet that are used that fall into this part of the park versus the number of feet that aren't in this part of the park, and divvy it out. That's why we do our overarching municipality work, and we tend to go in on other things, including joint rec, when we're talking about larger projects that are more encompassing of the land itself. In other words, we don't usually get into nickel and diming on some major projects. You know, we didn't go to everybody along Division when we redid that and said, oh, portion of your property line is here, and you might get some of this irrigation on it. Or there's a beautification along the road. We want you to contribute to it, to residents along there, for example.
Yet when we repave an alley, we are expecting those residents to pay 50% of the cost.
Which is what our policy is. Our policy is not to nickel and dime people on our improvements for the community, on roads and such. So if this was an entire park, again, like we're talking your open space example, then I completely agree with that. And we have that in a lot of our agreements when people use our park space. But, you know, we're starting to get into, there's communities in Colorado, there's a community in Colorado that did this, where everybody contributed to their portion of the road, and that's how everything got assessed, and everything got sliced out, and the community went bankrupt and had people moving out en masse. So I think we have to be very careful about how we start pursuing this finger pointing of our funding, where and when it makes sense, and where and when it doesn't. I think we could get in very much into some very micromanaging of staff and contracting that is outside of our own policies and ordinances. All right, other questions? Go ahead, Tim.
So in the open space, what work is actually being done? Are sprinkler heads being swapped out?
Not in the open space. So what feeds the open space?
No, not, what work will be done in the open space?
None north of the right-of-way.
Oh, it's
North of
shown as
MDOT's
the
right away.
complete
So this
the-
wasn't
area.
clear in the packet.
Yeah, the map is to illustrate the fact that if we don't do the proposal, then we'll have to isolate all of the zones that we currently have, because it's essentially like one system, one web of irrigation that connects everything. So there is one feed and one zone that goes all the way from West End bathrooms to the other side of the volleyball courts. And so the reason that you're seeing what is going to be affected in the open space by the volleyball courts, so the orange, the dark blue, and so on and so forth, that is to illustrate the fact that when you turn it on, you turn all of it on. Now, it comes on at different times, but it's all connected. And that's where we worked with the Department of Municipal Utilities and MDOT to figure out what locations would make the most sense to make sure that our system is actually better set up for the future so that we can isolate it. And it won't look like this in the future. It'll actually be a lot cleaner so that we can isolate. It's just like a word that is pretty consistent with this. So no work will be done like in the actual open space north of that right-of-way. It's just that it won't become like a dead zone. It'll basically just be pipes underground that we can't do anything with unless we reconnect them to a different backflow.
Okay, that wasn't clear in my packet, and
Okay.
thank you for that clarification. I retract my comment about funding.
Fair enough. I wondered where you were coming from on that, so that makes sense
It seems like the
now.
entire project area was set for an overhaul. but
That
it's-
makes sense where you're coming from. I was a little confused on that, so. Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Tim.
Just a final comment is, yeah, I'll be voting against this because $500,000 to irrigate sounds like just the median, because we're not going outside of the MDOT right-of-way. And we could be a lot more effective if we planted white oak, yellow birch, white pine, just outside of MDOT's right-of-way, especially on the south side, but even the north side. You let those trees mature, they'll provide a lot better traffic calming and a lot better reduction of urban heat island than turf grass. Like turf grass, it's very 20th century. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing, okay. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. All right, at this time, we'll open this up for public comment. I'm going to give them a moment to click their computers and such so we don't press
Thank
all your
you.
buttons and mess up your files.
Thanks.
Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor? Opposed?
No.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Yes.
Commissioner Werner?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Yes.
And Mayor Shamrow?
Yes, motion passes. We have two separate items coming up, but I think I want to talk about them as a whole first, and maybe even, I'll be nice and read both the motions together at the end of the day. So this is the annual review of, basically, of the city manager and city attorney. So as part of this, we always, after the reviews are done, which are public information, we do open them up for contract questions or negotiations, and we had some very basic requests come back to us this year. One of the things that was pointed out, and I think got a little, I think this comes from people who, knowing the procedure and doing the procedure and what's actually written, because we review it every year, all, the cost of living adjustments have always been kind of approved after the reviews every year, as long as there's been a good review. So I think that was how that was written in the memo. I've talked to our employees here, and they're fine if it's, subject to the city commission every year, because that's really the intention of that. So I wanted to clarify that point. I did also want to say that some people have emailed about our staff's pay. And I want to remind everyone that this was an entire process we went through last year. The city manager's range was set before the city manager was even hired. We went through the whole RFP process and comp study to come up with an acceptable salary range. The city manager was then offered a contract in that range and negotiated. The city attorney had not had a comp study done in years, and that was addressed last year and adjusted as such. So we've had a couple emails and such kind of indicating that these salaries are out of line, and they are not. They fall within the average of comparable communities, as well as I think some confusion that the cost of living increase is tied to our ACT, which is our non-union employees, but all of our employees, union and non-union, get cost of living adjustments every year. So that is why we want to include, or why it was brought to us to, and has in the past been part of contracts with the city manager and city attorney, because all other employees of the city have the same consideration, and it would be tied to that indicator, not a flat rate that fluctuates, or that would never fluctuate like it would for our other employees. So I think, Lauren, did you have a legal fine point to put on anything?
I didn't, there was some feedback during the day today, and I just wanted to address that there may be a feeling that it's a perpetual thing in the contract. The reality is that this is a process that happens annually, and, that could be clarified in those amendments if that's what the commission would like to see. But that's the intention, is that it's an annual process like it always is.
Mark?
So I just want to clarify that this is modeled on the ACT employee agreement, and that those 3.5% increases are cost of living. They are not merit-based. They do not have to go through a performance review to be eligible for those. It just happens.
The ACT.
For ACT,
For
correct.
ACT. So I just want to clarify that this is not asking for a unique or special type of compensation increase relative to the rest of the city staff who are non-union. So that was my first question.
That's correct.
Then my second question is, I know that there's been discussion about the pay rates for city staff. Are there staff in that ACT group who are perhaps roughly comparable in the north of six figures category?
Level 9 would be, like the city engineer, I'm not sure who else is in there.
there
The
are.
assistant city manager, yes, there are.
So there are ACT employees who would be getting this 3.5% each year, who are making roughly in the same ballpark as the city attorney and the city manager. In the layperson's thinking about what ballparks look like income.
I don't have it right in front of me, but we have multiple positions that are making over 6 figures.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions or issues anybody want to?
Just a comment. In my business world experience with salary administration, you generally distinguish between at-will employees who are not protected by a individual contractual arrangement, and then you have your executive team that tends to be operating under a contractual arrangement with the employer. And I don't think I've ever seen any overlap between those two categories. Use of the ATC as, in essence, a benchmarking for our contracted employees, the top leaders of our organization, struck me as a little strange. I would expect any, if we have annual contracts with the individuals, then I would expect any increases to be baked into that annual contract, and it could be less than what's happening in the at-will world. It could be more than what's happening in the at-will world. But I find the blending of those to be kind of an organization this size.
Commissioner Wilson.
Are our employees at will? Or for cause?
ACT group employees are at will. And I don't want to speak for.
But there's still some recourse, even if being at-willed. They still have some protections.
They have protections under specific statutes and so forth, correct?
Okay.
So I can address a little bit of how this ended up here and why I personally am comfortable with it matching the ACT, which are our department heads versus, union or other contracted employees, is because in the past, those percentages were baked into contracts. They have been in the past. And what happened was, as there was recession and as there was slower growth, we were seeing that the employees under the city commission, being the city manager and city attorney, were sometimes seeing a greater increase than our ACT employees. And so that is why we have that. It's actually not meant to be, it's meant to be more of a on par with our other management team than it is to be a mixing of things because we are public facing and we are public disclosed. That was thought to, at one point, and maybe this commission wants to change its mind about it, but that was thought to be a more fair way of doing it so that our employees at the top were matching the COLA adjustments of our non-union department heads versus numbers that they had negotiated years before, and maybe we're now seeming out of line to people who were one step below them.
Thanks for that background.
Are there any other questions or a motion? Oh, go ahead, Tim.
So the 3.5% cost of living, like that, was there conversation about just tying that to CPI or something for the annual basis?
We used that from Christine's analysis as the HR for the ACT groups. So, and knowing that is, it's hard because our legal expert is over here as well as being one of the people whose contract this is about, so I don't want to put her too much on the spot. But there's also, because of how it was mentioned, steps that have been mentioned here for all of our employees that are set up. If anybody's ever seen government advertisements of this is a, especially at the state, this is a blah X level or X step position. There are increases that come along with those naturally as well. So the 3.5 is that cost of living adjustment, but there's other adjustments that happen actually within the other paid employees within the city that are contracted employees, being the city commission's 2 employees, don't participate in. They come and renegotiate their salary with us every year. This year, they're just asking for that 3.5 portion of it and a couple extra vacation days in one case, and that's all that's been asked for this year.
I also, oh, sorry.
No.
I also want to make sure that I was reading this correctly, that a lot of what is in these two contracts is to bring the city manager and city attorney closer together in terms of how their contracts are structured. Is that an accurate assessment?
So this is just a little bit of history as well, is that when the wage and compensation study was done 2 years ago, it was at that time recommended that, and we're not talking about Liz and Lauren, we're talking about the city attorney and the city manager, and I know it's awkward. Let's just acknowledge that. But that those two positions, as the analysis came out from that study and from the HR department, should be the same and within the same range.
Mm-hmm.
So the range they talked about was 160 to 190, and ultimately that was the range that was put out when they were seeking the new city manager.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how that analysis evolved, along with the rest of the employees that were included in that wage and compensation study at the time.
So for the benefit of the public and those listening, and can you talk about who conducted that wage and compensation study for the city, and how perhaps, if we're looking on Indeed or at some, non-municipal wage studies, what that kind of is that a fair comparison, or is there something unique about municipal compensation structure?
Well, municipal compensation structure, and Liz, please chime in as well, it is traditionally a bit different because of the benefits that municipal employees have that aren't often in the private sector. So the factors that were used were a set of comparable communities, and that there were certain characteristics that were chosen by the consultant.
And the consultant was who?
Top of my head, I'm sorry.
It's been about a year and a half, 2 years.
And that process was managed out by the city manager and the assistant city manager at the time. So, does that help?
Yes. So the way that there were communities that were benchmarks for looking at this when we were looking at this compensation study.
That's correct.
So the item before us here is about the contracts for the city manager and the city attorney. And I wanted to say one other thing really quickly, and again, for the benefit of the public, I know our board knows as well. But I think sometimes in the community, the idea is that, well, sometimes it's that the mayor is in charge of everything, and I am not. Don't even have an office. It is a city manager, strong government that we have here. But many of the employees are under the city manager, but the city attorney is equal and her own, which is why these are the two employees that report to us. So the city manager is not the city attorney is not under the city manager. They have equal posts. If you remember the old breakdowns of government and the 3 pillars, we have kind of 2 pillars with our upper employees, and after that, everybody else falls underneath them, which is also why they are the ones who give instructions to that staff that falls underneath them, and none of us are legally allowed to do that. So I just wanted to clarify that as we've had these conversations, because I feel like that has come up this year as well. But again, what we have before us is 2 employees who had very good reviews, asking for a 3.5 salary increase that matches our management team's cost of living adjustment for the year. So nothing extraneous compared to that. And a little extra vacation time for the city manager. And I believe that's the big highlights of this, is it not? So do we have a motion for this, or does anybody else have any other questions about that?
The question about the motion, so what's the necessity of the word every twice in there? So every July 1st and every employment anniversary, if this is intended to be like this is what we're doing this year and it'll be back in front of us next year,
We can strike.
Why does it have to say ever, like, I don't,
It doesn't
It
have
doesn't.
to
We can
say
strike
every.
that.
okay, and then just as far as part of my hesitation, and you probably hear it in my voice, is it gets to, and it's not a direct comparison necessarily, but not everybody reads it. I read it occasionally about the whole, how many multipliers do the CEOs get compared to their average worker sort of thing. And so it's, to me, it's compound interest. And a set percent increase for somebody that makes at the high end and a set percent increase for somebody that's at the low end is very different. In compound interest, it just runs away eventually. Like, I know we're only talking about a few years here, but that's part of my hesitancy here. Like, it's easier for me if we said, well, on average, it was this many thousands of dollars of a raise that city employees were getting, and to take that dollar amount and say, okay, this is comparable. A percentage to me is not, it maybe is comparable, but it's not necessarily comparable to say, well, they were getting 3.5%, so how about 3.5% here? Maybe, but that's where, again, it's hesitation. It's not that I'm opposed, I'm just,
I would say we can strike the every. I don't hear any objections, and I think that was the intention and the spirit of how we've always done it, is annually we do these reviews and bring them forward. I will point out, though, and I appreciate your concerns, and I have those concerns exactly with CEO salaries. CEO salaries right now, though, where things are getting really out of line, are 200 times.
Yep.
And we have had conversation here that some of our administrative people that are below our two employees are in the six figures or well up. So we do not have the chasm between our highest paid employees and their direct reports and so on and so forth down. That's why we created the STEP system. Frankly, that's one of the benefits of working for, and I say this because we always have open positions, of working for a government, is our salaries and wages are all public and out there, just like the state. So, and I've been involved with AEW, an organization that focuses on women's equity and especially equal pay for over a decade now. And government employees and teachers and anybody who has a union tend to not see that giant wage gap that you see when you're an individual business because, again, it's all open, it's based on merits, and it's based on your classifications. And so I appreciate Commissioner Warner's concerns, and I don't discount them, but I just want to make it clear for the public as we're having this conversation that, or first of all our salaries are open, and second, that this, as an organization, has tried to do very well by including restructuring of all of our employees last year, that we went through that whole public process of restructuring and stepping up, and many saw both advancement and increase, many of our higher employees saw advancement and non-union and increase in pay. So I would just want to point out to everyone that we don't do these in a vacuum, and we don't proceed with having conversations like this if we're not taking care of our employees. We also just recently readjusted another couple of union contracts, and we have more coming. And I think that was another one of those corrective points. So I would bring that back to the conversation we're having here, though, about the city manager and the city attorney, basically, and I understand the concerns, and again, this is why we look at it annually, of a 3.5 salary increase that is the same as our ACT group gets, and 1 extra week of vacation. Anyone else have any other questions? Go ahead, Jackie.
I'm really getting deep into the weeds here, and I'd like to restate my understanding of what this package is now, and tell me if I've got it right or not. But for either of the individuals, let's say the contracted annual salary is $200,000, and it's going to increase to $207,000 on July 1st, and then on the anniversary date, it will increase the $207,000 by another 3.5%? Is that what this proposal is?
That's correct. It's the same as what ACT, it's in line with what the ACT group has in their policy.
Again, I am struggling with the integration of our executive contracted leadership with the ACT salary range administration. I certainly support an increase, an annual increase. I would like to see these contracts be for 1 year, and I would like them to have 1% increase, an annual adjustment. I difficulty taking policies intended to apply to at-will employees and applying them in a contracted employee situation.
Mark?
A couple things. One, would it be better than and more comfortable to just have a set number?
It would for me.
But, and what if that set number still worked out to be these percentages? And then the other is, considering, we're with, one of these employees is within the first year and the tangled web of issues that were inherited and being dealt with, I think there really is a merit currently for what they're doing with the amount of resources that are available. So these roles aren't easy to fill. We just went through it. I don't want to have to go through it again, really. And I've done it several times in other governing bodies, and so really, and I don't want to make it awkward because they're in the room, but like if we weren't to do this and we put ourselves in a position where we have to fill those seats, those ones aren't as easy to fill as they are, as ours are, So, with that, I'm in full support of this. I don't think it's that big of a jump considering the roles and the average length of time that individuals fill those positions. And then the other point is to remember that the every July and the every employment anniversary being stricken is also because like that should just go without saying, we're looking at this every year anyways. So
I'd like to make the motion, Commissioner, or Mayor Pro Tem, sorry. Oh. Well, thank you. I had offered to read it, and so.
How skilled.
Well, it's dark. You gotta
So I'll make the motion that the mayor and city clerk execute an amendment to the employment agreement with city manager Elizabeth Vogel, which increases annual vacation time to 5 weeks and provides a 3.5% salary increase July 1, subject to a satisfactory performance review, and provides an automatic 3% salary increase on the employment anniversary date, January 3rd, with such agreement subject to approval as to its form by the city attorney, and that the mayor and city clerk execute an amendment to the employment agreement with city attorney Lauren Tribolocht, which provides a 3.5% salary increase July 1st, subject to a satisfactory performance review, and provides an automatic 3.5% salary increase on her employment anniversary date, October 31st.
I'll support. I didn't.
Okay, thank you,
realize it
Commissioner
was
Stanley and Mayor Pro Tem
both.
Wilson. Is that around from the last time? And I'm going to say I appreciate having this conversation. However, I also am going to say that I think a lot of times people try to put business onto government, and it doesn't always fit. Everything that they do is very much in public. Their pay is very much in public. And I feel like in my 8 years here, I see nothing but, and having gone through the executive hiring process now 3 times for 3 different boards in this government, that there is an attitude that people working for the city doing executive level work and department head work don't deserve to get paid like business does, don't deserve to get compensated. I'm not talking about you, Jackie. And so I just want to remind people that in the public that these are CEOs, these are our head counsel for an in-house counsel. If you want to think about this like a corporation, we're a $15 million corporation. And we work very hard to make sure that not just our employees directly, but that their employees under them through contracts and how we adjust pay, such as 3.5% bumps for the ACT group, do all get compensated well. And that is a unique thing of having a union and non-union and governmental oversight of different employment groups. So it isn't always clean, and I understand that, and that's a fair point to bring up. But, you know, perhaps in future years, we'll look at it as a number, but I also look at us in a year with great recession, or sorry, with high inflation, as we've all talked about and know. And I don't know that I want to see our employees' compensation affected by that, people with families and homes and everything else, without, because because it's not a round number. And maybe next year that's what we have to look at, but that's where we are right now. So this is the motion before us right now. If we don't get to this, then I guess I would be interested in hearing somebody's numbers right now, so we can have their compensation of what numbers they would like to see for the annual contract then. So, but for right now, we have the motion in front of us, the clean motion, the one that they've asked for, with 3.5% salary increases. And I'm going to open it now up to public comment. So is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board. All in favor?
Aye.
Now, against?
No.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell,
Yes.
Commissioner Werner,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
I would like a rereading, please, of Ms. Stanley's motion, because I thought that she indicated that the pay increase on the anniversary of employment would be 3% and not 3.5%. Is that true?
It says 3.5 in the motion that it was copy and pasted out of the packet. I only took out the word every.
Thank you. Aye.
And Mayor Shamrock.
So I was like, aye.
Okay.
Okay,
Motion
thank you all for
carries.
that. And we now have some notes for going forward for next year to talk about and to take into it. You know, maybe this it might still be the same number, but maybe it helps to have it out there as a number, so. As well as other items, but.
May I add one last comment?
Please.
I hope that this conversation isn't used to diminish in any way the positives that were mentioned during performance evaluations. These are valued employees, and they are rare and appreciated. And I just want to be sure that this, my concerns with both the process and the initial proposal has nothing to do with the feedback earlier given. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Okay, moving on now. We are at the end of our agenda. And so I will now open it up for general public comment. So if you have any general public comment, please feel free to approach the dais. I know I've seen Director Howard there waiting all evening, so.
Yes, it is enthralling to be here. Thank you. My name is Michelle Howard. I live at 435 West 11th Street. I am a city resident, and I'm also the director of the Traverse Area District Library. I brought with me Heather Brady, who is our marketing manager, who's going to be doing a little show and tell while I speak about the library. But I'm here because on August 6th, it's the library's millage will be on the ballot. So I'm just here to give you some factual information. And if you have any questions, because I know it's public comment, you can't ask me, please feel free to reach out to me at the library, and I'll answer any questions you might have. We sent a packet to you of some information, some facts and figures. So basically, we circulate about 1.3 million items a year. We have about 420,000 visitors to all of our locations. And we really are 6 locations under one card. And what you'll see really is that every location kind of meets the needs of their community. And we're kind of like 6.5 locations, because we did bring the bookmobile today, which is our other location. And that really gets us to the places where people who can't meet us, we can go meet them. We go to daycares, we go to the baby pantry, we go to senior facilities. And while those numbers are all really important, what's really the story of the library is how we help our community. And we do it in so many ways. Some examples are, this year I have a flyer I can leave. We started feeding kids lunch. We average about 500 lunches a week. Our biggest day was 213 lunches. It was our kickoff day for Summer Reading Club, and we're really proud of that work because we not only want to feed their minds, but we want to feed their bodies when possible. We also have about 3,600 kids and adults signed up for Summer Reading Club. If you go to Storytime at East Bay, you'll find Mr. Matt singing along at Sing and Stomp Storytime. You'll see some of the things out here. We provide at all of our locations too, games, vinyl records, and if you don't have a record player, you can check that out too. We have like a thermal detector. We have some 3D printers. These are things that maybe you wouldn't expect to find at your library, but you also maybe wouldn't want to buy yourself. And so check the library. We might have it for you. There's a quartet at Interlochen this summer. We have cooking classes all over at our locations. Like I said, 3D printing. We have so many online resources. I could talk all night, but I feel like we've already been here. So, and I only have 30 seconds left. So really, we do this at a great value to our community. We do it at a 264% return on investment. For every dollar we collect in millage money, we return back to our community 3 times in databases, programs, things that are checked out. We do it proudly for our patrons who are your constituents in order to build a stronger community. So have any questions, give me a call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
welcome.
Any other public comment? Heather? I'm just kidding.
Hi, Doug Kimball, 523 North Spruce Street, Traverse City. So I would like to applaud the city for providing the open house for citizen involvement in the master plan process. So we're going to have 8 hours to come and make our voices heard and our desires for our neighborhoods understood. It's 8 hours, that's a lot, I think. And it has the potential to demonstrate just how a process should go forward and how a policy that affects our everyday life can be influenced by our input. And so I'm asking the city to go the full distance with this program. It has the possibility to show that the city really is responsive to our input and that people's effort and interest is not wasted. And we're given the impression that participating in the process will shape or help shape the outcome. So please don't stop halfway through the process. Please don't forget the listening sessions when you consider adopting the plan that's put before you, and make the plan reflect what we want for our future. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Any other public comment? So I don't see anybody jumping, so I will bring it back. And any final comments from the commissioners? Seeing none, meeting is adjourned. Almost 9 o'clock on the dot. We missed it by 2 minutes.